convictions to your clients? I mean, despite all that noise, we talked about it last week, where we raised $641 billion on behalf of clients. No firm has ever raised anything close to that, of which 300 something of the $1 billion was from the United States. So,
listen, I keep saying this and people still don't get it. You're watching the wrong game. Everyone's glued to the charts, chasing meme coins, chasing the next 100x like it's a lottery ticket, and meanwhile the real players, the real money, they're building the rails. You think Larry Fink wakes up in the morning checking what Pepe or Dogwafat is doing? No. He's in meetings with policymakers, bankers, engineers, literally reshaping the plumbing of global finance while retail is staring at TikTok influencers screaming, "Buy the dip." That's the distraction. The real action is quiet. It's boring. It's memos, it's pilots, it's partnerships. And then one day it's live, and by the time you notice it's already too late. Look around in 2025. You've got BlackRock with over 10 trillion under management, not talking about whether tokenization is coming but straight up saying it's here. Tokenized treasuries? Already being piloted. Tokenized money market funds? Already running. You think they're experimenting for fun? No, this is the largest asset manager in the world. They don't waste time on toys. When they roll out a pilot, it's because the endgame is adoption at scale. And you know what rails they need? They need fast, cheap, scalable, compliant settlement. That's not Bitcoin. That's not Ethereum with its gas fees. That's XRP. People laughed at Ripple for years. Oh, they're just working with banks. That's boring. Yeah, boring until those banks start actually using the rails to move real money. Boring until regulators finally admit, okay, this isn't some shady security scam. This is infrastructure. And look what happened. The SEC fought Ripple for years and still couldn't kill it. By 2025, the case is settled. Ripple's walking out not only alive but stronger with clarity. Meanwhile, projects that people hyped up in 2021 and 2022 are ghosts. Where's Luna? Where's FTX? Gone. But XRP is still here with corridors live, institutions building on it, and now you've got BlackRock and their buddies in the same sandbox. The funny thing is, the average retail investor won't see it until it smacks them in the face. They'll keep saying XRP is dead, while the IMF is dropping reports with Ripple's name in the footnotes. They'll keep arguing in Twitter spaces about whether Ethereum is ultrasound money while the BIS is quietly building CBDC pilots that run smoother on XRP rails than on ETH. Adoption doesn't happen with a marching band. It happens with policy documents, with boring PDFs, with technical papers. By the time it hits the news, it's not the beginning, it's the end of the rollout. And here's where people miss the point. BlackRock doesn't need hype. They don't need retail. They already own the market. Their game is efficiency, cost savings, compliance. If tokenization saves them a fraction of a percent on trillions, that's billions. They're not here to gamble. They're here to optimize. And the infrastructure that makes sense for them is XRP. Fast finality, low fees, regulatory clarity, institutional track record. It's like the perfect fit. Ethereum is great for experimentation, Solana is great for flashy retail projects. But when you're talking about the actual plumbing of global finance, pensions, treasuries, real estate, CBDCs, you want rails that don't break. And I know someone will say, but BlackRock hasn't said XRP by name. Of course they haven't. Do you think they're going to announce their playbook to retail? No. They talk about tokenization in broad strokes. They talk about efficiency. They say public blockchains will be important. And then in the background, they're meeting with Ripple, they're testing corridors, they're piloting real products. That's how institutions work. Quietly, deliberately, and then suddenly. Think back to the internet in the 90s. You think IBM or Microsoft were hyping it up on MTV? No. They were signing contracts with governments, building infrastructure, while retail was saying, the internet is a fad. Same energy here. The difference is now it's faster. Technology adoption cycles aren't decades anymore. They're years. You don't have 10 years to sit around and wait. By 2025, pilots are already live. We're not talking about maybe someday. We're talking about right now. And it blows my mind that people still think the play is chasing the next meme pump. That's fine for a quick flip, but it's not the reset. The reset is in the boring rails. The reset is in tokenization. It's in the fact that your paycheck, your mortgage, your student loan, your pension, everything is going digital. Not just digital like online banking. Digital as in tokenized, programmable, and interoperable across borders. That's the game. And if you don't see how XRP is sitting right there, already built for that, I don't know what to tell you. This is why I keep hammering on 2025. This is the year where you stop asking, is this coming? And start realizing, it's already here. BlackRock isn't speculating. The IMF isn't speculating. Central banks aren't speculating. They're building. And the retail crowd is still distracted, waiting for Elon to tweet about Dogecoin. That's the separation. The ones paying attention are positioning themselves now. The ones laughing are going to wake up one day and realize they've been onboarded into a new financial system without even knowing it. So when I say the reset is quiet, this is what I mean. No fireworks, no hype cycle. Just boring adoption, boring memos, boring pilots. Until suddenly it's not boring anymore. Suddenly your entire paycheck settles on rails you said were dead. Suddenly the liquidity pools are deep, the corridors are live, and the system is flipped. And the people who ignored it will be the ones complaining that they didn't see it coming. You know what cracks me up? The same people who mocked Ripple for a decade are now pretending they always knew this was coming. Back in 2017, 2018, everybody was calling XRP a banker's coin, saying it was centralized garbage, saying it would never survive. Meanwhile, Ripple was in the trenches, meeting regulators, building corridors, grinding through lawsuits, doing the boring work nobody wanted to pay attention to. And here we are in 2025, and who's still standing? Ripple. Who has clarity? Ripple. Who has actual products running in production? Ripple. Half the projects that people swore were going to change the world have disappeared, but Ripple's still here, stronger than ever. And the wild thing is, this is exactly how the institutions like it. They don't want flashy. They don't want hype. They want stability, compliance, trust. You think BlackRock or Fidelity or Vanguard are going to risk their reputations moving trillions of dollars on some chain that breaks every other week? No chance. They're not betting on vibes. They're betting on proven infrastructure. Ripple spent years proving that XRP can move money quickly, cheaply, and securely, and that it can scale without blowing up. That's the stuff that gets the Larry Finks of the world interested. Look at what's happening right now. BlackRock isn't even hiding it anymore. They're all in on tokenization. Larry Fink literally went on CNBC saying tokenization is the next step in finance. And this wasn't some throwaway line. They're building. In 2025, they've already rolled out pilots for tokenized treasuries. They're experimenting with tokenized real estate funds. They're not talking about maybe. They're already running the tests. And when you tokenize assets worth trillions, you need rails that can handle trillions. You need liquidity, speed, compliance. That's not Bitcoin, it's too slow, too expensive. That's not Ethereum. Gas fees make it unusable at scale. That's not Solana. You can't have your rails going offline every few weeks. That's XRP. And don't think Ripple hasn't positioned itself perfectly for this. They've been quietly cutting deals with central banks, testing CBDCs, building bridges for cross-border settlements. Africa, Asia, Latin America corridors are live. Remittances are flowing. You think that's by accident? No. That's years of boring meetings, PowerPoints, policy talks, all building to this moment. The lawsuit with the SEC didn't break them. It forced them to sharpen their game. Now in 2025, they've got clarity in the US, MiCA in Europe, frameworks in Asia, and institutions finally feel safe plugging in. The thing I love is how people keep underestimating the power of momentum. Once institutions decide a standard, that's it. It's not a debate anymore. Retail doesn't get a vote. When BlackRock, Fidelity, and the IMF decide that tokenized assets are settling over rails like XRP, the rest of the market just falls in line. Think about how SWIFT became the standard for decades. Nobody voted on it. It just happened because the big players adopted it. Same thing is happening here. The difference is XRP is faster, cheaper, and programmable. Once it's baked into the plumbing, it's game over. And if you're still skeptical, look at the breadcrumbs. In 2025, Ripple isn't just some startup anymore. They're in policy conversations at the highest levels. They're getting name-dropped in central bank reports. Their tech is being used in pilot programs for CBDCs. And BlackRock, with $10 trillion in assets, is openly telling you tokenization is the future. Connect the dots. BlackRock doesn't need to say XRP out loud. Their actions speak louder. They're not running pilots on meme coins. They're running pilots on serious infrastructure. Here's the punchline. Ripple's playbook and BlackRock's blueprint match perfectly. Ripple's been laying down rails for cross-border payments, building compliance tools, establishing partnerships. BlackRock's mission is to tokenize every major asset class, stocks, bonds, real estate, money markets. To do that, they need rails. They need speed, liquidity, and compliance. Ripple already has the product. XRP already has the design. It's like puzzle pieces clicking together. And when they snap in, the whole system changes overnight. And yet, people are still distracted. They're still chasing the noise. They're still refreshing meme charts, thinking that's where the future lies. I'm telling you, that's not the game. The game is trillions of dollars being tokenized and moved on rails like XRP. That's the reset. It's not loud. It's not hyped. It's not sexy. It's boring infrastructure. But boring is where the money is. So when I see BlackRock moving, and I see Ripple still standing tall in 2025, I don't need them to spell it out. The writing's on the wall. You either see it now or you'll see it later when it's too late. And let's just be real here. This isn't about whether you like XRP or not. It's not about whether you think Ripple is decentralized enough or whether the logo looks cool on your Twitter profile. That's retail nonsense. Institutions don't care about your feelings. They care about settlement. They care about liquidity. They care about compliance. If a network checks all those boxes, they use it. If it doesn't, they don't. Simple as that. And XRP checks the boxes. Do you realize how long Ripple has been playing this game? Over a decade. That's forever in crypto years. They didn't fold after the lawsuit. They didn't vanish after the hype died down. They just kept building, even when everybody was throwing mud at them. That's what institutions respect. Stability under pressure. Do you think BlackRock, with $10 trillion on the line, is going to trust some project that came out in 2021 and is still trying to figure out its tokenomics? No. They're going to trust the team that's been audited, sued, stressed, and still delivered. And look, 2025 is the year all of this is crystallizing. The lawsuits are over. MiCA in Europe is live. Asia is miles ahead with digital asset frameworks. The US finally stopped dragging its feet because Congress couldn't ignore what the rest of the world was already doing. Ripple walked through fire and came out with clarity. That's why banks are more comfortable than ever plugging into their system. That's why BlackRock can experiment without worrying about headlines blowing up in their face. You need to understand how these institutions think. They don't chase upside, they manage downside. They don't care if XRP goes from 50 cents to $5. That's pennies to them. What they care about is, can this infrastructure handle billions of dollars moving every day without breaking? Can it do it faster and cheaper than the current system? Can we stay compliant while doing it? Ripple answers yes to all three. That's why XRP fits the institutional checklist. And here's the kicker. Once that decision is made, you're not going to get an announcement. They're not going to ring a bell and say, "We've chosen XRP." They're just going to start using it. Corridors go live. Liquidity pools deepen. Settlement times shrink. And you won't even realize it until your own payments start clearing faster and cheaper than before. By then, it won't matter if you believe in XRP or not, you'll already be inside the system. This is what I mean when I say Ripple's playbook meets BlackRock's blueprint. Ripple spent years building infrastructure in the background, and now the biggest asset manager in the world is laying out the demand for tokenization at scale. These aren't two random ships passing in the night. This is convergence. BlackRock needs what Ripple has, and Ripple needs institutional buy-in at scale. That's happening now. You don't need a crystal ball to see it. Let me hammer this point home. Everyone loves to talk about adoption like it's some loud, flashy moment. But adoption is boring. Adoption is a memo sent in a corporate office. Adoption is a pilot program that nobody outside the boardroom even knows about. Adoption is regulators quietly greenlighting frameworks while the news cycle is focused on elections or celebrity gossip. And then suddenly, one morning, it's live. That's where we are in 2025. We're not in speculation land anymore. We're in rollout mode. And if you don't believe me, just look at the language. BlackRock is saying tokenization isn't a question of if, it's a question of how fast. The IMF is saying cross-border payments need to be instant and interoperable. The BIS is saying CBDCs will need bridges to private networks. Do you see where this is going? All roads point to infrastructure like XRP. You don't need them to say the ticker out loud. You just need to look at what boxes they're checking. The people who keep laughing are the same people who laughed at the internet in the 90s, at smartphones in the 2000s, at Tesla in the 2010s. And what happened every time? Adoption. Quiet, boring adoption that turned into global domination before the skeptics even realized what happened. XRP is walking that same path. It doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter if you bought the bag in 2017 and got wrecked and swore you'd never touch it again. None of that matters. What matters is the rails are being laid, the institutions are on board, and the system is flipping. For years, the SEC hung Ripple out to dry, dragging them through court, trying to make an example of them. And Ripple stood there, took the hits, and kept building. And now that fight is over, XRP has clarity. That means the biggest roadblock for institutional adoption is gone. You don't have to explain to a compliance officer why they're risking their career if they touch XRP. You don't have to fight regulators in every jurisdiction. The clarity exists. MiCA in Europe spells it out. The UK has a framework. Asia has clarity. Even the US, the slowest player, finally caved because they couldn't keep holding back while the rest of the world raced ahead. That's what opens the door for the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the Citigroups to step in without fear. And you know how institutions operate. They're like dominoes. One falls, the rest follow. BlackRock moves, Fidelity moves, State Street moves, pension funds move, sovereign wealth funds move. And when they move, they don't just move millions. They move trillions. That's why this is so big. Retail can scream all day about which meme coin doubled this week, but none of that matters when trillions are flowing into tokenized treasuries, tokenized real estate, tokenized commodities, all settling on the rails that Ripple's been building for over a decade. The best part is that this doesn't even require mass retail speculation. Adoption isn't about whether people FOMO into XRP. Adoption is when your government starts issuing digital welfare payments on Ripple's rails. Adoption is when your bank quietly upgrades their system, and suddenly your international wire clears in seconds instead of days. Adoption is when you log into your retirement account and see tokenized treasury fund as an option, without even realizing it's running through the same rails that people on Twitter swore were dead years ago. That's adoption. Quiet, boring, irreversible. Now think about this. If you're BlackRock, you don't care about the noise. You care about efficiency. If you tokenize $1 trillion in treasuries and you can shave even 0.5% off settlement costs, that's billions in savings. That's what moves them. Not memes, not speculation, not narratives. Efficiency, scale, safety. And XRP gives them exactly that. It's the invisible bridge that lets them tokenize everything without breaking the system. And what blows my mind is how many people still don't see it. They're too busy arguing on Reddit about decentralization purity tests while the actual infrastructure is being laid under their feet. Guess what? Institutions don't care if your chain is philosophically pure. They care if it works. They care if regulators will allow it. They care if it saves them money. And XRP checks all of that. That's why, while everyone's distracted, it's becoming the backbone of the reset. People laugh because they still think Ripple is just that company that got sued by the SEC. That's old news. Case closed. Ripple didn't just survive, they came out of that war stronger. And now in 2025, you've got corridors opening up across Asia, Africa, the Middle East. You've got Ripple tech embedded in central bank pilots. You've got remittances moving faster and cheaper than ever. And what's wild is, it's invisible. That's what people don't get. Infrastructure isn't meant to be flashy. Roads don't trend on Twitter. Plumbing doesn't make headlines. But without it, nothing runs. That's XRP's role. You don't notice it until you realize the entire system depends on it. Meanwhile, retail is still crying about the price not mooning every week. They want fireworks, not roads. But BlackRock doesn't care about fireworks. Larry Fink isn't staying up at night wondering if Dogecoin's 24-hour volume beat Shiba. He's looking at how to tokenize treasuries and move them instantly with compliance built in. He's looking at settlement in seconds, not days. He's looking at liquidity that can scale globally. And that's exactly why XRP keeps coming back into the spotlight. Fast, scalable, liquid, regulatory clarity. Finally, that checklist matters more than hype, and XRP is sitting there with every box ticked while the loudest coins can't even process transactions when the network gets busy. Think about it. Bitcoin is digital gold, sure, but you can't tokenize the world's markets on top of a slow, clunky chain. Ethereum tried, but fees spike every time something gets popular. Solana looks flashy until the network hiccups. Meme coins? Fun for 5 minutes, zero use case. Institutions aren't going to risk trillions on a network that can't guarantee uptime, speed, or compliance. They want the thing that just works quietly, consistently, invisibly. That's why Ripple's strategy always felt boring to retail. They weren't chasing hype. They were in boardrooms, in meetings with regulators, sitting with central banks, setting up infrastructure. While you were looking for the next 100x, they were building the rails to move $100 trillion. And you see it now in 2025. Tokenization is the word of the year. Everybody's saying it. ETFs on chain, bonds on chain, real estate on chain. It's not theoretical anymore. It's happening. Pilots are running. Assets are live. And what do you think bridges those assets? You need liquidity. You need speed. You need interoperability across jurisdictions. You need a neutral settlement asset that isn't just hype but actually works within the rules. That's why you keep hearing XRP. Not because it's sexy, but because it's necessary. Most people are still fighting the wrong battle. They think this is about which coin is popular on Twitter. It's not. It's about which asset fits the institutional blueprint. BlackRock doesn't care about your favorite meme. They care about moving markets efficiently. They care about scale. And when you step back, XRP is perfectly positioned. That's the scary part, because by the time retail realizes it, institutions will already be knee-deep, positioned, holding, building. And once they lock it down, retail comes in last, just like every other market cycle. So here's where I land with all of this. You're living through a financial reset that's already in motion. It's not coming in the future. It's happening right now in 2025. BlackRock, the biggest asset manager on the planet, is openly talking about tokenization like it's already a done deal. Central banks are drafting CBDC frameworks. Real estate, bonds, treasuries, even money markets are testing tokenized pilots. And if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking this is just another hype cycle, you're already behind. Because here's the brutal truth. The institutions aren't waiting for you. They're not going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, time to get in." They're moving while you're distracted. They're building roads while you're watching fireworks. And XRP is not just some altcoin fighting for attention. It's the quiet bridge asset, the neutral liquidity layer that keeps fitting into every serious conversation about tokenization, compliance, speed, and global scale. It's not about speculation anymore. It's about necessity. You've got a choice right now. You can laugh it off, scroll past, chase the next meme pump and dump. Or you can pay attention to where the real money is moving, where the silent hands are positioning, and start preparing before it's too late. Because when this system is fully live, when trillions are moving on chain, when tokenization is mainstream and CBDCs are plugged in, you're not going to get a second invitation. You're either already in position, or you're playing catch-up forever. So stop underestimating what's happening. Dig into the research. Watch the moves BlackRock is making. Pay attention to Ripple's progress, not the noise. And most importantly, don't sleep on XRP. Because while everybody else is arguing about price action, the future financial system is being built, and XRP is right there at the center of it. Don't miss it. This is your wake-up call.